so successful that we're trying to develop it in other parts, around other wilderness areas in Africa to protect chimpanzees, including around Chimpunga, where Rebecca and Fernando are working, also in Uganda and Kenya and South Africa. So a very successful program, but this is just a small aspect of what's wrong with the chimps. And one of the biggest problems today is what we call the bushmeat trade. And I think it was mentioned in the film, was it? Yes. Which is very different from the subsistence hunting that people have relied on in the forest for hundreds and hundreds of years, just shooting enough for themselves and their families. Bushmeat hunting is commercial. The bushmeat trade is a commercial trade. It's been made possible because foreign logging companies have moved in and opened up the forest with roads. Even if they practice sustainable logging, just taking out the biggest trees, the roads are giving access to people. The hunters go in from the towns. Other people move in and settle, taking with them the risk of infecting chimpanzees with disease. And they become infected from the chimpanzees and gorillas as well. And the bushmeat trade, unlike a typical hunter, the hunter who's after bushmeat trade will kill anything. Elephants, gorillas, chimpanzees, antelopes, birds, bats. And this meat is smoked, trucked into the cities where the urban elite will pay more for it than they will for a piece of chicken or goat. It's their culture. And it's involving huge amounts of money. It's a very, very difficult trade to try and do something about. The Goodall institutes are trying their best, working with other NGOs, with big donor organizations like World Bank, and with the industry, with timber companies and with mining companies. So there we're doing our best, but it's a hard battle. And of course, this kind of thing is going on in other parts of the developing world. Africa is not alone. It's certainly going on right across Africa. When I was, in 1986, there was a conference in America which for the very first time brought together all the different people, scientists, who were studying chimpanzees in Africa, and some of those who were working with captive chimps in decent situations. And that conference changed my life, because we had a session on conservation which showed how the problems around Goldie were right across the chimpanzee range. We had a session on conditions in captivity, which made me so shocked to see how chimpanzees were treated in medical research laboratories, the training of circus chimps or other entertainment chimps, and the way that they're used as pets. And so, although I went into that conference as a scientist, because by that time I had my PhD, I left as an activist because I knew I had to spend time in trying to pay back, because the chimpanzees had done so much for me. And so from that time, October 1986, I haven't been more than 3 weeks consecutively in one place. And I've been on the road about 300 days a year, which is crazy, but it's so important to carry around a message trying to raise awareness about the problems facing the great apes, the African forest, the African people, learning more and more about the interconnectedness of what's gone wrong with our planet. And of course, as the tropical forests around the world are cut down, what is it doing other than leading to desert conditions, other than the fact that we're losing biodiversity, that more and more species are becoming extinct, locally or totally. But in addition, every time you cut down a tropical forest, masses of CO2 is released into the environment. And this is adding to climate change. And since Al Gore's film An Inconvenient Truth, the topic and concern about climate change has been brought to the top of political agendas and people's thinking. And of course, we know too how we're poisoning this planet. the agricultural, industrial, and household chemicals that we're using them all over the place. There are environments where our children are born into a place where the water they drink, or the air they breathe, or the food they eat is making them sick. And this genetically modified food, we still don't know the long-term cumulative effect of genetically modified food, which I know is grown in Spain, which the British are fighting, but is being grown right across the United States. I could go on for a long time talking about the plight of the environment on the planet, the more and more species becoming endangered, and all the social problems as well, the crippling poverty, the hunger, the number of children who die from lack of food, the number of people who go hungry every day, the ethnic violence, the growing numbers of refugees, not only from armed conflict, but also increasingly from destruction of the environment, environmental refugees. And so, learning about all these problems, it's not really surprising, is it, that as I was traveling around the planet, I kept meeting young people, university students, high school students, young people out in their first jobs who seemed to have lost hope, young people who seemed to be very depressed, or very angry, sometimes violent, or just apathetic. It doesn't really matter what we do. And when I began talking to these young people, they would say more or less the same thing. We feel this way because we feel you've compromised our future and there's nothing we can do about it. So let me go back for a moment. We talked a lot about similarities between ourselves and the chimpanzees, but we are different, aren't we? If we wanted to, we could arrange it that this gathering tonight and my talk could be beamed out electronically all over the planet, at least to all those places that have the sufficient electronical technology to receive it. Chimpanzees can't do that. We've sent people to the moon. It actually doesn't really make sense to compare the human intellect at its best with even the most bright chimpanzee. And make no mistake, chimpanzees can do things that once we thought only we could do. They can recognize themselves in mirrors. They're aware of themselves as different from others. They can learn the signs of American Sign Language, the sort of signs like bird, cat, drink, tree, and so on. And they can learn about 400 of those signs, and they can use them when they're communicating with each other, as well as when they're communicating with their teacher. And there's one chimpanzee in Japan called I, which means love, and she is so smart using her touchpad on the computer that high school students lose out over certain of her tasks. She does them better than the high school students. So chimpanzees, without doubt, are very, very smart. But, as I say, you wouldn't ever expect to have an Einstein in chimpanzee society. You might have a chimpanzee equivalent, but to compare a chimpanzee brain with the brain of Einstein or Beethoven or whoever doesn't make sense. So, given that we are the most intellectual being on this planet, and ever walked on this planet, then how come that we're destroying our only home? It's being estimated that if every person on the planet today had the same standard of living as we have in this room, we would need 5 or even 6 new planets to provide sufficient non-renewable natural resources. Well, we don't even have one new planet. We've got poor, old, battered Mother Earth. And how come that we've got ourselves into this state? Do you think we've lost something called wisdom? And when I talk about wisdom, I'm thinking of, let's say, the Native Americans in North America,